Hey guys, Sean, Leslie over Dummies. Today we got a bit of a fun one, I guess you could say. Well, fun, fun is a subjective word. I find fun in data. For some reason, it's just my thing. So what I'm going to be doing today is running through some tests with varying bolt springs using CO2 only. So I've converted my 9.1 to accept CO2 only. This is not a trying to debunk anything kind of video. This video, it's going to come up sooner or later. You know, Pepperball's been making these statements about not selling to civilians anymore and yada yada yada, although I keep getting their ads and all that stuff. And so alternatives are going to have to be found for some of the products that we've grown to love. And one of them is the VKS bolt spring. I've tested the VKS spring and the FSC spring back to back in HPA setting, and it provides zero power increase. It is not a power mod using HPA. Rather, it's an efficiency mod. So regardless of its HPA or CO2, that heavier VKS spring helps keep the valve, it helps mitigate wasted air. So the bolt, it moves forward and backwards faster, wasting less air. Now, when you're using HPA, you got a lot of air to burn. So it's probably, you would never notice it maybe unless you were shooting on a 5 CI tank or something like along those lines. But if you're using a 10 CI or a 13 CI, in the end, in the grand scheme of things, I mean, it might be the difference between an extra 5 or 10 shots. I mean, I'm just throwing a number out there, and that's on an HBA tank. But its main benefit is CO2. Obviously, when you're running a 12 gram CO2, you have limited capacity. Your gas that's all you got. So you're trying to maximize your power and your shot count. And in this case, this mag is 8 shots. An FSC mag is 6. So that will be something to take into consideration when I show you the following videos. And then we crunch the numbers at the end. But like I said, VKS bolt spring does what it's supposed to do using CO2, and I'm about to prove it to you. But again, this video is meant to search for alternatives, and the main reason actually for doing this video myself is to help somebody out that is also searching for an alternative. And I think it's the more people that are running tests is good for the community. No one person's trying to hang on to some idea that they own the market. In this case, they don't. Leslie, the community is huge, much bigger than any one person, and that's the main reason why I like it. A lot of friendly faces. I get your comments, I read them, I respond. Enough wasting time. I will show you the clips coming up. Factory bolt spring HP68 12 gram Crossman CO2. 8 rounds. $390.
358. 324. 300. 276. 258. And that was the last round.
VKS bolt spring, HP 68, 12 gram crosswind.
B92. 362. 328. 308. 286. 266. 244. 222. I think that was the last shot.
One, two, three blanks. So we're going to call this one bolt spring number 1 for this test. HP 68, of course, 12 gram Crossman CO2.
$388.
And we had our first misfire, which oddly enough is running some unknown spring. And nope, she doesn't want to go. Round loaded properly, but well, we'll have to try that one again. Bolt spring number 1, HP 68, 12 gram Crossman, take 2. Now, if I have the same sort of misfeed, I will deem this spring no good and I'll move on to the next. Because clearly I didn't have any misfeeds with the VKS or the factory FSC spring.
Marker is a little cold. Obviously, I just restarted immediately, so we'll take that into consideration. $378. 3 360. 324. 300. 272. 250. And that appears to be it. Or not. Another. Misfire. And it's not because they're not loading. This is 100% a problem with the spring. So, wasn't exactly awe-inspiring results. So, we'll move on to the next spring. But I think I'm just gonna write that one off for now, so. Okay guys, this is gonna be bolt spring number 2, we'll call it, HP 68. And I wanted to note during this test that I'm onto a new carton of Crossman. Now, there's been a lot of comparisons and such of CO2s lately. To me, I mean, CO2 is really CO2, but this is the cartridges that I was just firing. I can't see if you can see, so let me have another look here. So you can see, it has more of a taper to it, a slender taper. But it doesn't have that strange looking cap here on the top like I've seen in some of your guys' videos out there. And I've seen that in more than one video, so is it a Canadian thing, a US thing? I don't know, maybe an email to Crossman can solve this, so might do that. But any case, well, here it is side by side with, so this was the ones I was just using. As you can see, it's punctured. That's the slender one. And here's the new Crossman that I'm about to use. You can see it's a lot taller with a shorter neck. And once again, it doesn't have that ugly looking cap that I've seen you guys down in the US got there. So, does it make a difference? I don't know, but it's of noting that I will be using the new one for bolt spring number 2. Punctured just as quickly. I attribute that to actually these old mags. They do a very good job of that. So let's see what this guy does. Wow, 402. Best one yet. But is it the spring or is it the CO2? Don't make me redo this test, Crossman. Oh, that one came back. 370. $332. 314. 292. 274. 2 258. $240. 1, 2, 3. About the same as the VKS spring on the finish, so 3 blanks. And it's empty. Okay, that bolt spring, no malfunctions, did better. I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna look at the footage with the 2 FSC and the VKS spring. I'm gonna choose the better of those 2 statistically on paper, and I will retest it back to back with this spring while following this little excerpt here with the new Crossman CO2 and see, is it the CO2, the different batch, or is it a bolt spring? Okay, so looking back at the footage, the VKS spring on CO2 held a slightly higher feet per second advantage for longer than the factory FSC spring. So between the FSC spring and the VKS spring on CO2, remember on HPA that doesn't make a difference. They both shoot exactly the same feet per second. And this has to do with the timing, the amount of time the valve stays open, which can help your shot count, it helps efficiency. So the VKS is better than the factory FSC spring. So I'm going to retest that spring, HP68, 12 gram Crossman, from the new batch, to go up against my bolt spring number 2 that had a higher first shot and also held the average above. I usually use 300 as my good quality shots, 300 feet per second, so it held an average above 300 longer than the actual VKS spring. But was it the CO2? And that's what this is going to prove here. At least I hope so. $400. $368. $326, and it actually sounded like a double fire there. 1, 2, 3. No, the bolt just stuttered a little there. That's kind of weird. $312. $286. $254. $222. I think that finished exactly the same as the other, the first round of VKS spring. Ah, crap. I should have chronoed that. So there was one more in there. 1. Interesting though. Only got 1 blank on that one. Which means it was actually using almost all the CO2, but that last 2 shots, they were pretty weak. So that does explain
the higher feet per second on bolt spring number 2 is related to the CO2, because that new CO2 retested with the VKS spring, they tested almost identical first shot. Now, I'm going to have to crunch the numbers there pretty hard. I think they're very close to each other. So much so that I'm probably gonna have to write them down, and I'm gonna do a little just follow up at the end of this video here. So stay tuned for that. I mean, the main purpose of this is we're trying to find an alternate to the VKS spring. It's not going to be around forever, so be good to find some replacements. So let's go crunch those numbers, and then I'll get back to you guys in a sec. All right, so you guys had a chance to watch it. What did you think? Here's what I think. FSC spring starts strong, finishes weak on CO2. The VKS spring starts just as strong. There's 2 FPS difference in the hot shot. When I say hot shot I call, it's kind of what I refer to as the first shot that you fire once you punctured your CO2. So the VKS hot shot was 2 FPS higher, but the main difference between the FSC spring and the VKS spring was the VKS spring held about a 4 to 5 feet per second velocity advantage over the FSC spring throughout the course of that 12 gram CO2. Now, granted, that was the shitty batch of Crossman, but they were 1 for 1. That was shitty Crossman versus shitty Crossman. For some reason, I just got a picture of South Park in my head, shitty walk, but anyways. So I chose the better of those 2, which was the VKS. Bolt spring number 1 failed. Any misfire, in my opinion, is a fail. Regardless if it's at the beginning of the mag or at the end of the mag, it doesn't matter. You can't have those. So bolt spring number 1, out. Bolt spring number 2, on the other hand, performed based on the previous test with shitty Crossman. It almost, wow, it didn't blow them out of the water, but it was 10 feet per second faster on the hot shot. So I chose the better of the 2, which was the VKS. And then I put it versus the bolt spring number 2. And here's the numbers, because as I was recording it, I mean, I'm trying to remember numbers, and all I could remember is that it was too close to call, and that's a good thing. So let me show you what I got here. And I kind of foobarred on the last, when I was testing the VKS spring on the good Crossman, I miscounted and there was still a shot left. So what I'm gonna do is, I was basing the average over 8 shots. I'm gonna toss out the 8 shot, just so we have a fair play field. So here's the numbers I got. I'm taking a page out of Mr. LLC here with the handwritten notes. So bolt spring number 2, hot shot, 402 feet per second versus the VKS's 400. Second shot, 370 versus VKS 368, 332 versus 326, 314 versus 312, 292 versus 286. Now you see the pattern here. It's almost the opposite of what the stock FSC spring was doing. So this bolt spring number 2 is about 4 to 5 feet per second faster. I mean, just when you're looking at it anyways. So, and here's the last shot. Last shot on the bolt spring number 2 is 240. So I threw that one out because I shot this one and didn't chrono it like a goof. So
this is what I come up with. The average on 7 shots with bolt spring number 2 is 36.91 joules. And the average for the VKS, 309 feet per second on 7 shots, 34.41 joules. Oop, locking that there. Now, something interesting happened right here where this dipped hard, the VKS. If I had have counted this last shot, if I had a chrono this, I had a feeling this might have been a 200. That would have really dragged this average down. So here in the end, it's 11 FPS difference between the two. And when you, 11 feet per second sounds like, you're like, wow, 10, 11 feet per second. Yeah, but I mean, the number you really should be looking at here is the joules. They ain't much different. Granted, like I said, this number, had I counted that, might have drugged this average way down. This might have been more like a 33 or 32 versus a 36 or 37, whatever you want to call it. So in the grand scheme of things, it's not like jumping up and down better. And there could be a variation in the CO2 capsule itself. You probably did notice my wardrobe change. I had to go work in the yard today, but these tests were done back to back. And then I'm kind of doing the intro and the exit at the same time here, because I had to go through all the numbers and look the video over and make sure I had everything correct. But I mean, the takeaway here is there are alternatives out there, and well, hopefully this information will help somebody else, and we can get to the bottom of this. I mean, as it stands, I'll probably run that bolt spring number 2 for a while now and see if it stands to the test of time. If you're familiar with the VKS spring, it tends to deform. It has a large spacing between the coils. I don't have it out here. Let's see, maybe it's, you know what, it's still in this guy. And this is just a kind of a footnote here. VKS spring. Can never tell if you guys can see. So VKS spring and FSC spring. Kind of tough to tell because it's nice and bright and sunny, but these are real ones because they have ground ends, I promise you. They came from a reputable source, but the coil spacing in this VKS spring is quite a bit larger than the FSC spring. The gauge is different, the gauge is larger. I think these are 1.8 and these are 1.6 wire gauge. But the main thing is these tend to, and you guys have seen it, I mean, I don't have to tell you, but you put a couple hundred rounds through on a VKS spring, it starts to notice it gets a little curve like that. The FSC spring tends not to do that because the coil spacing is a lot tighter. But again, it's not, doesn't make it better. It's just something to note about longevity. So I'm gonna roll with the bolt spring number 2 for a bit. I'm gonna beat on it, and I'll report back, and in the meantime, hit me up with your questions, comments, and let's figure this one out.